Ready? I'd like to call this meeting of the Lakewood City Council for Tuesday, July 6, 2021 to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bell.
Present.
Councilmember Boki.
Present.
Councilmember Brandstetter.
Here.
Councilmember Farmer has been excused, and Councilmember Moss has been excused. Deputy Mayor Whalen. And Mayor Anderson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Well, welcome back to a live City Council meeting. I guess I refer before we start to the City Attorney to explain our technical difficulty and how we're going to conduct the meeting tonight.
Responsibility is with the city clerk, making sure that your meetings are all in order. As you may well be aware, there was some sort of a fire that impacted the cables that run all the internet to the building and impacted some amount of what we're able to do in a council meeting. We intend to have virtual and in-person meetings simultaneously and live stream the meetings. We are not able to do the live streaming part tonight. We are definitely going to have a recording of the meeting. We will do whatever we can that way. We will have our minutes, and obviously we're having a live meeting, so we are having the open public meeting we are supposed to have, and we will post whatever we have of this meeting onto the website so that people are able to have access to it. That is as good as it can get tonight. I know the clerk worked with our IT department for quite a while, but this is actually beyond the boundaries of Lakewood. It's a pole that burned down with a couple of the necessary cables, and it involves Rainier Connect. So with that understanding, your meeting goes forward.
You can do it up there. Thank you. So now would you please rise, join me in the pledges of allegiance, followed by a moment of silence in honor of our men and women serving overseas.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So now we move to proclamations and presentations. The first item of business is a proclamation recognizing Pierce County Library System's 75 years of service. I'd like to invite Ms. Georgia Lomax up with Councilmember Bell. Ms. Lomax is the Executive Director of the Pierce County Library System.
Great, I would love to read this. So the proclamation, whereas the Pierce County Library System started serving 55,000 people on May 1st, 1946, offering 6,385 books from 7 locations with 1,108 card holders. And whereas today, the Pierce County Library System serves 600,020 people, offering nearly 1 million books, movies, and other items from 20 locations and online with approximately 360,000 card holders. And whereas the books, materials, equipment, and requests from the public have transformed in the past 75 years, and the library system continues to be regional leader to reimagine services that meet the public's needs to gain learning resources for all ages, deliver books, materials, and classes for enjoyment, and offer welcoming places and spaces for diverse communities to connect. And whereas 1946 Pierce County Library may not recognize the 2021 Pierce County Library with computers, printers, online books instantly available on computers, tablets, and phones, and live online classes and events, 1946 Pierce County Library would know that the 2021 Pierce County Library, by its continued commitment to connect people with valued, reliable resources at the right time, and whereas the library continues to be a dedicated steward of the public's investment to support residents' growth and curiosity, offer excellent reading choices, and work to connect and strengthen growing and changing communities. And whereas the Pierce County Library thanks Pierce County communities for allowing the library system to be the community's choice for the discovery and exchange of information and ideas, and to spark success for residents for 75 years. And now, therefore, the Lakewood City Council do hereby proclaim May 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021 as Pierce County Library System's 75th Diamond Anniversary, and recognize the contributions in which Pierce County Library has made in support of our community. Proclaimed this 6th day of July, 2021. Signed, Don Anderson, Mayor. Here we go. Let me take this one.
Georgia, if you'd like to say a few words, feel free.
Great. Well, thank you so much for recognizing the library's 75th anniversary. It's amazing we've been here for this long. We don't feel that old, but we are ready for our next 75 years, and we are so honored to be able to serve the residents of Lakewood, providing them with a great selection of books to enjoy and information to help them learn and grow, and services to help them succeed and reach their goals. So thank you very, very much for these wonderful words and for being part of our celebration. We love serving the people of Lakewood. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate what you do for the community. I was a kid who enjoyed the basement of a small-town Carnegie library immensely and couldn't wait to go back and get my next book. So thanks for all you do. We appreciate it. We now move to the Clover Park School District report, and for this we have Board Member Anthony Velez.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, community. Thank you for having us today. I'm Board Member Anthony Velez of the Clover Park School District. For now, the programs for students that underway, the district is offering free summer programs for students in grades K through 12 this summer. Programs run through July 29th. 3 two-week sessions will be held in person in various locations across the district, along with credit retrieval programs. Session 1 has already ended, and Session 2 begins July 6th. Through a special partnership, students enrolled in elementary STEM classes are taking field trips to the Lakewood Gardens to explore plant and animal structures, plant identification, and human interaction through climate science. Very cool. Free online tutoring services for middle and high school students. The district is providing free online tutoring services for students grades 6 through 12. The service is called Paper. It's available 24/7, giving students the access, including for this summer. Middle and high school students can access it through Clover, the portal that Clover Park has. We are continuing with free meals. The district is serving free meals to all ages, 18 and younger. Through the summer school, free delivery and free daily meals are available to students from their schools when they arrive, or they can meet and have their meals at destinations throughout the district. Meal locations and additional information are on the district's temporary website at cloverparkschooldistrict.k12.washington.us. Fall 2021 returned to 5 days a week of in-person instruction. The Fall Clover Park School District will provide 5 full days of in-person learning to grades K through 12 in our schools. Clover Park School District will have a virtual learning option for elementary and secondary students whose families have decided to not send their child to school full-time if in person. Interested families were asked to complete this process at the end of last month. Students would enroll in the program for a full school year. Clover Park School District will be using OSPI-approved online alternative learning education, which is called ALE. This program is separate from the school district, so students will not have a classroom teacher from your neighborhood school. Students will continue to have access to resources and support currently provided through the school district. Kindergarten registration for fall 21 through 22 open online. Clover Park School District elementary schools are registering new kindergartens for the 21 through 22 school year now. Register your child by completing the online registration form on our district website. To begin kindergarten, children must be 5 years old on or before August 31st. The child's birth certificate and immunization records are required at the time of registration. Clover Park School District partnered with Military Family Networks in distributing food to over 500 active duty and veteran families near JBLM. Each family received over 85 pounds of food and household items worth over $200. District has temporary website. The district has launched a temporary website at Clover Park School District cpsd.cloverpark.k12.washington.us. The district will launch a new website this fall. The website redesign project was underway well before last month's system outage. The district system outage. The district experienced a temporary system outage due to malware. The event happened in May. Clover Park School District is working with a third-party cybersecurity experts to complete an investigation to determine the full nature and scope of this. This is an ongoing investigation, and we don't have specific information to share at this time. If we determine that the event impacted personal information, we will move as quickly as possible to notify individuals. Follow and like Clover Park School District. The district has Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Please consider liking and following the district for news, announcements, and pictures of our students and staff in action. Our next school board meeting will be Monday, July 12th at 6 p.m. School calendar, sessions 2 of summer enrichment program, July 6th through the 16th. Session 3 of summer enrichment program is July 19th through the 29th. Free summer meals program is through June 17th through August 27th. And the first day of school will be September 1st. The 2020-21 board goals: student growth achievement, parent and community engagement, communication with stakeholders, supportive learning environment for students, staff retention, recruitment, and professional development, and of course, fiscal responsibilities. Any questions?
Any questions from council? Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Velez, thank you for your report. I had one thing, and although everyone has been focused on COVID vaccinations, that there is a longstanding requirement for other vaccinations for students that in the past year, without going on, may not have been enforced or verified. So is that going to be more focus on it as the students who are choosing to come to in-person learning? Is that going to be something that is going to be mandatory?
Well, I believe we will be following, of course, the guidelines that the state has issued out. So, of course, I'm not 100% sure, though, on exactly how they will handle individuals, perhaps, maybe if I'm answering your question correctly, non-vaccinated versus vaccinated. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm not really referring to COVID. I'm referring more to the measles and the other vaccinations that have historically been required of all children attending public schools.
Right. I would believe following our guidelines, we would need to make sure that we are following those. And if there are any documents or shots, vaccines that are required, then they will have to sustain those policies.
I think, okay.
Perhaps a more sensitive one. There's rumor in the community that the Clover Park School District had a critical race theory curriculum that was to be taught in the classroom, and I understand that is not the case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is absolutely. You know, we apologize for any miscommunications or ideas that may have came from within the board or just from you know, being there and being a part of our sessions, but I can definitely clarify that that is not the case.
Although you do have a program that appreciates the diversity of your students and the community and appreciates that. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We greatly appreciate you bringing those up, and absolutely, we are more geared and willing and wanting to go that route.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thanks again for your report. We look forward to in-person learning for a whole year so the kids can catch up.
It will be fantastic, well needed as well. It would be good to have our students back in the classrooms and to at least even have that option too.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
We now move to public comment. This is when any member of the audience may comment on items of interest to the city, whether or not they are on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you represent a group, please identify that. If you represent a group of 3 or more people, you can have up to 10 minutes. But that would preclude people from the group from also making comment. Please identify yourself when you come to you're called to come to the podium, such as by name and city, such as Paul Boki, Lakewood, Washington. The first person, you get there's a warning. It's been a while since we've been here, like a year and a half. There's a warning light on the podium. Yellow, it means you have 30 seconds left. Red, your time is up and the trap door opens. So the first person who signed up to speak is Dave Zink.
Esteemed city councilors, Lakewood city councilors, thank you for giving us the opportunity for speaking about an important issue. In my opinion, this proposal that would destroy something like 115 native Gary oaks, the only oak species native to the state, by the way, that will be destroyed if this proposed warehouse mega parking lot proposal is allowed to go through. You know, what do you think about this heat wave, this heat dome that we suffered from?
Please speak into the mic so we
Okay.
can have the record,
What
please.
do you think about this? How did you it looks like you survived. How do you enjoy that heat dome we had a few days ago? Yeah, well, this could be the new norm if we do not start taking this climate crisis a bit more seriously. Oak trees sequester carbon, produce oxygen. It's a keystone species for a shrinking habitat. Keystone species means that without that, it's pretty, you know, the habitat's going to go to, you know what. And for parking lots and warehouses, you know, this, okay, how much carbon do warehouses sequester? How much oxygen do warehouses and parking lots produce? Well, I'll tell you, folks, somewhere between 0 and none, okay? This is not a hippie thing. I'm not a hippie, and it's not rocket science. This is common sense science, folks. And warehouses and parking lots, not so much. We're getting too many of these. We need to use this land for something better. Keep the oaks. You know, it's much easier to prevent damage than to go back and try to repair it once it's made. It's easier, cheaper, so let's avoid this destructive project. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Next person to speak is Fran Phelan.
I'm a little short here. I'll stand on tiptoe. I'm a Lakewood resident, Clovercrest Drive, Southwest. And I also I spoke at the last meeting via Zoom, and my whole contention on the Gary Oaks was, as a common citizen, I am prevented from cutting down a Gary Oak, but the council can rezone an area so that they can cut down the oaks. And I understand that they've all been examined, and they were all deemed unworthy of saving. I find that hard to believe, that of 115 or 118 trees, that none of them, not one, is worth saving, because they are the workhorse, according to the other gentleman who spoke that night, of sequestering and oxygen production and so on and so forth. And I also understand that this warehouse that is going to be put up in that area is prospective. It's a proposed warehouse that no corporation is yet saying, I want this warehouse and I want to come in and I will pay you rent for it. So I kind of had, after the meeting, I was thinking that if we keep on going in the direction that we're going and cutting down our trees and putting up a parking lot, which, as Dave said, doesn't produce any oxygen, doesn't do anything, that we are known as Lakewood. Well, if we keep going, we will only be lake, because we won't have any trees. And if we don't have any trees that will filter the groundwater, then we won't have any lakes. So we will cease to exist. But our coffers will be full of corporate monies. And I think it's the wrong direction that we're going in. And personally, I'm not a tree hugger. I'm not political. I have no idea what I'm doing here. But I really think that there is something else that we can do, or that they can build this structure and keep 50% of the trees. My neighborhood back east did the same thing. Our streets are a little curvy, but they saved all the trees, and kudos to them, and I think we can do that too. Thank you.
Next person is Mandy Candler.
Thank you, Council, for letting me speak to you tonight. I'm here also about the Gary Oaks. I'm a native of the city of Lakewood. And when the city was incorporated in 1996, its vision was to be governed by its citizens to provide a good life for our citizens in this town. I am not sure what's happened to our mission over these years, but you, the council, need to stop and reflect on what makes this city so wonderful. It's nature, it's waters, it's people. And among these is a rare oak savanna that is being decimated in our town. I'm also not a tree hugger. I just want to see this town stay viable for future residents. Why is the city I don't understand. Why is the city allowing developers to circumvent our need for these irreplaceable trees in this city. No monetary fine is enough to compensate for the loss of our grove of Gary Oaks. They provide habitat, carbon offset, cooling, and natural beauty. Developers have been allowed to chop the Gary Oaks down or butcher them or allow ivy to cover them, and thereby they can say they're deemed not healthy. But if you've chopped all the branches off or let ivy grow all over them, they aren't healthy. So it's when they're gone for good. What makes Lakewood Lakewood? Good question for all of us who live here. Not parking lots, not warehouses, or another tall building on a concrete parking lot. Please, please, please hold the ground for your citizens and require the preservation of our Gary Oaks. Through careful arborist monitoring and proactive tree preservation, we can do this. We citizens are watching. We are watching your planning decisions closely, and we won't be silent, for we choose to keep Lakewood a truly livable city for future generations. And I thank you for your time.
The next person is Christina Monetti. Christina Monetti.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to make comments this evening. My name is Christina Monetti, like you just heard, and I've lived in Lakewood for just under half a century. I know it doesn't look like it, but today I would like to comment on tree preservation and protection in light of the recent historic, and let's be frank, quite apocalyptic, if you ask me, heat wave. A few weeks ago in the public comments, we heard about the need to preserve trees in terms of carbon sequestration, habitat, and urban heat mitigation. Today, the term urban heat has new meaning for us here in Lakewood, where we thought we'd be relatively safe from rising temperatures. Now, everyone in this room has experienced the hottest temperatures ever recorded in Lakewood, where the mercury hit 43.3 degrees Celsius. That's 110 degrees Fahrenheit. This should make it painfully clear that we must do everything possible to preserve and protect as many Gary Oaks and other trees as we can. The Tree Preservation Code must do just that, preserve our trees. A tree preservation code cannot exempt industrially zoned areas or any residential lots under 17,000 square feet from preserving trees. Only in Orwellian doublespeak would this be a tree preservation code. Issuing permits is not a way to protect trees. Dozens of permits are issued every year, apparently, to cut down Gary Oaks in Lakewood, according to the city. Over a decade, this would mean hundreds of trees, to say nothing of all those cut down on smaller residential lots, industrial properties, and illegally. The city of Lakewood should look to a jurisdiction with a sound tree preservation code, such as Oak Harbor. The vice president of the Oak Harbor Gary Oaks Society told me recently, in answer to my question about how many permits to fell oaks are issued there a year, that on average, that would be 0. So in contrast, in Lakewood, just last weekend, 9 of the 16 Gary Oaks at the Venerable Key Antiques property on Gravelly Lake were cut down with a permit from the city. And that's like in an area where there are lots of oaks. It was really cool. It was really nice, but they cut them down. So 0 Gary Oak loss is what Lakewood wants to aim for, especially now when scores of trees have already been lost. So I've also observed like clear cutting along different roads by Gravelly Lake, so I think it should also apply to other trees. They're priceless. Other cities would love to have the trees we have, yet ours are being cut down every day with the blessing of the city. We need our trees more now than ever. And we need a tree preservation code that does what it's supposed to do. Thank you for your time.
Next is Helen Wagner. Next is Helen Wagner. She'll be followed by James Dunlap. So we have till 8 o'clock for this section of the agenda. So if you will queue up or get ready for the next person, that'll help us move along. Thank you. Give more people a chance to speak.
Good evening. I'm Helen Wagner. I've lived in Lakewood for several years. And I noticed that several people this evening have pretty well covered the situation of the trees. So I don't have a beautiful speech set out, but I have heard a couple of things that really disturb me. One is that when a developer was cutting down trees and it was questioned, he said, "Oh, just plant more trees." That doesn't cut it, pardon the pun, because little trees don't do the same thing that 150-year-old trees do for our environment. A beautiful example that I have noticed of preserving a tree that I think a lot of developers might look at is on Gravelly Lake Drive, right in front of Great Cuisine of India, where there is a nice little circle around a big oak. You have to kind of drive around it. Maybe that's a good thing. But it is beautiful, and I think more trees could be preserved in just that way. Thank you.
Next is James Dunlap, followed by Jenna Lee, excuse me.
My name is James Dunlop, and I'm a Lakewood resident. I wanted to comment on trust and city governance. Every November, the people of Lakewood vote for city councillors, and after that, they can sleep at night, confident that the city is in good hands. This relationship between the city of Lakewood and the people it serves hinges on trust. Ordinary people usually don't know what the city is planning and permitting, even if it directly affects them. How many people read public notices in the Tacoma News Tribune? How many people are avid readers of the Suburban Times? And when notices drop through the mailbox, can we expect the average person to read and understand the opaque language of planners and lawyers? Take the Springbrook development. I don't think that many people were aware that the city were rezoning the area and wanted to allow the killing of 114 large Gary oaks for the area to be replaced by warehouses. This means that there is a question mark about whether the city of Lakewood can be trusted to safeguard the interests of its residents, its heritage, and its natural habitat. While the city may follow the letter of the law, there is little in the way of real, as opposed to legal, transparency. We canvassed residents living in Springbrook and found that none of our sample had any idea what was being planned. The city might say that it is the residents' fault because they took no interest in what was being planned. But I would suggest that this only indicates that the city must strive for greater transparency. If the city is planning on approving the killing of 114 Gary oaks in Springbrook and turning a beautiful open space into a barren warehouse development, they should inform everyone in the city beforehand using accessible media, remembering that most people don't read the public notice section of the Tacoma News Tribune. Perhaps they can use YouTube, videos, Facebook, and community websites, making every effort to keep things simple. For example, the city could contrast a photograph of what Springbrook looks like now, with its expanse of oak canopy, and an artist's impression of a sterile, concreted warehouse complex. Then the people of Lakewood can be asked which they prefer, which image best reflects their preferred vision of the city's future. But as it stands, the people of Lakewood can no longer go to bed in the knowledge that the city is looking after their interests. They literally don't know what destruction they're going to wake up to next. Many will feel that their trust has been betrayed, and they will ask questions about why the destruction is happening. And inevitably, they will ask, who benefits?
Next is Jenna Lee, followed by Amelia Escobedo.
Hello, my name is Jenna Lee. I'm a current resident of Seattle, but I've driven here to Lakewood today to discuss the detrimental impacts the destruction of Lakewood's scary oak trees would have on the city's residents, particularly as it relates to equity. Firstly, the heat. No doubt that we have all felt the sweltering heat that swamped the Pacific Northwest recently. Conventional paving materials such as concrete and asphalt tends to absorb heat and transfer it to surrounding areas, and by EPA metrics, paved areas can boost the temperature in cities by as much as 22 degrees Fahrenheit. In contrast, trees and vegetation lower surface and air temperatures by providing shade and through a process called evapotranspiration. Shaded surfaces may be 20 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than unshaded surfaces, and evapotranspiration alone can cool areas by 2 to 9 degrees. Lakewood's large scary oak trees offer significant shade and are heat resistant, making them perfect heat-fighting trees. The replacement of these trees with concrete would also exacerbate our dependence on fossil fuels, as higher temperatures would drive up demand for electricity. It's critical to note that Lakewood has killed many of its scary oaks for the purpose of warehouse construction, particularly in areas that house disadvantaged populations such as Black and brown people and poor folks. Warehouses also increase health risks for nearby residents. For instance, increased exposure to air pollutants and greenhouse gases from industrial processes is well documented to heighten the likelihood and severity of respiratory disease. Western Washington as a whole is already underprepared for heat waves, which will come in more frequency and with greater severity in the future in light of global warming. Marginalized communities who have less support and resources at their disposal than the average American are even less prepared. How are you supposed to pay for AC if you have trouble just getting rent? Time magazine in 2019 has stated that heat deaths, quote, already kill more Americans than hurricanes, lightning, tornadoes, floods, and earthquakes combined, end quote. So the city of Lakewood must take these heavy costs seriously and develop strong tree protection policies. The existing tree preservation code does a pitiful job as it stands currently. For instance, the city has recently amended its prior requirement to preserve 10% of trees in industrially zoned areas that are being developed. Now it's 0%. Overall, I argue that the city of Lakewood is failing to do its duty to serve its residents as it pertains to environmental justice. The Gary Oaks are critical to making sure the city is livable for everyone, and all this development in poor areas and minority neighborhoods is sending the exact opposite message. Thank you for your time.
Next is Amelia Escobedo, followed by Shabana Ayuso.
Hello, City Council members. My name is Amelia Escobedo. I have seen you many times online, and I'm happy to see your faces in person. What I want to talk about today is systematic racism has consequences for all life in cities. The University of Washington did a study talking about the social inequalities, specifically racism and classism, are impacting the biodiversity, evolutionary shifts, and ecology health. And because of this, what is happening, what the study found, were fewer trees in low-income and racially minoritized neighborhoods in major cities across the US, less tree cover means hotter temperatures and fewer plant and animal species. Additionally, these areas tend to be closer to industrial waste or dumping sites than wealthier, predominantly white areas. A reality that was put in place intentionally through policies like redlining, as the author explains in this article. Fewer trees over decades has led to pockets of neighborhoods that are hotter, more polluted, and have more disease-carrying pests such as rodents and mosquitoes that can survive in harsh environments. These ecological differences inevitably affect human health and well-being. Another thing I would like to talk about is the Station District Sub-Area Plan that is going to happen. The demographics in that area is predominantly people of color. And I have found that our city council has been attacking predominantly places where people of color live. In this area, it's 36%. So white alone is 50% in this area. Blacks make up 12% in this area. American Indian make up 1.7%, and the list goes on. So in this area, it's predominantly people of color, and these are the people that you're gonna push out. The median income in that area is $42,000. How are you gonna house these people? This means that these people are not gonna be able to live in Lakewood anymore. You're pushing them out to farther cities. Environmental racism is real, and it needs to stop. We need to save the Gary Oaks. We need to save our motherland. We need to save the earth. This is not a joke. This has been happening, and we have to stand up. And if we don't speak, then nobody will listen. And that's why I'm here today. Thank you for your time.
Next is Shaban Iuso, followed by Joseph Tonato.
Hi, my name is Shavana Yuso, and I'm a resident of Lakewood. I live in Springbrook, and I'm testifying today because Gary Oak trees are important, and I want to focus on the impact that cutting these trees down will have on the people that live here and the lives that will be directly affected. You are forcing people out of their homes, some of them who have lived in Springbrook, Tacoma, Woodbrook since the 70s, just to build warehouses that don't even have a specified use. To create warehouses that will bring more traffic and pollution from diesel truck engines, warehouses that will add to an already increasing heat index, all the while displacing people from their homes and not providing anywhere for them to go. The warehouse that is supposed to be built in Springbrook will only bring about 20 to 50 jobs. Will these jobs even meet the median income of Lakewood, which is $50,000, $51,000? The arrow position does not. You have changed the zoning in Springbrook from residential to industrial already, but you haven't started building. I ask that you change them back. The people who live in these areas deserve to be given proper notice by holding meetings with those directly impacted and giving notice in plain language so they can fully understand. We are tired of you making decisions, deals years ahead behind closed doors and forcing us to go along with your plans. America is a democracy, not a dictatorship. Just because we are low income doesn't mean we are of low value. Our trees hold value, our lives hold value. Thank you.
Next is Joseph Tonato, followed by Christopher Escobedo.
Well, I'll start with, I prefer Jevon Ofenau X. How you doing? Black Panther Party. Why do we need the trees? Why do you need shade? Why do you need to breathe? They say the lungs of the earth are in the Brazilian rainforest, but where is the lungs of Washington? The trees, right? Why do we need them? To breathe. I used to walk around in Silicon, and the trees, they always kept us cool. And now I go out there, and all the trees that would keep us cool on the way from Tillicum over to Woodbrook, all chopped down, and now y'all want to do it again. It's pathetic. For corporate greed, I don't even understand it. And that's all I got. All power to the people.
Okay, we have Christopher Escobedo, followed by, I can't make out the first name, Rohrfield, last name. So, Mr. Escobedo.
Yep, my name is Christopher Escobedo. I'm the founder of Rise Against Racism, a nonprofit in Washington State. And, you know, I've been watching y'all all this year, man, and it's been disgusting to listen to y'all. I mean, you hear the undertones of racism almost every single day. I love when y'all talk about equity. You know, y'all just like, oh, let's make a statement about it and it's all good. No, it's not all good. When y'all shut down that shopping thing that all the Mexican shops had, and y'all built a warehouse that nobody even has, or it's for sale or whatever. Y'all. It's ridiculous. It's disgusting. Right now, y'all are business over people. Like, let's see if y'all do it. Raise your hand if you voted to chop down the Gary Oaks trees. Are y'all not gonna do it? I want y'all to do it because we want to know who we need to vote out. That's my point. You know what I mean? This is my motherland. My family's been here for 10,000 years. I'm pretty sure most of y'all can't say that. So those Gary Oak trees are part of my heritage and my family. And maybe you don't care because you're from across the water, but this is America. You understand that? Not Europe. So I'm asking you, I'm demanding you to look, I'm only up here, I'm not a tree hugger, right? But my city asked people to come over here and talk for these Gary Oak trees, and I'm here for my city, for the people who can't stand up for themselves, the people who are scared of y'all, you know what I mean? When I see you, I see a man, just like me, not above me, not below me, but right there with me. And I'm asking y'all to change your minds, be the heroes that we all need you to be, and change your decision about this Gary Oaks thing. Oh, we have plenty of things to talk about, but today it's gonna be the Gary Oaks. You know what I mean? So I'm asking y'all to listen to, maybe y'all should go talk to Native American people. See, my wife, she's gonna run on Native American consent. That means the Native American people should be involved in every decision that y'all make. This is our land, their land. You understand that? Like in 1776, that was over there on the other side of the country. Y'all didn't get this place until the 1900s. So we're a heartbeat away from where we used to be. And I promise you, it's gonna get back to where it was. We're gonna get our land back eventually. And we're gonna be here, we're gonna be able to get in these seats and make the decisions for all the people, for the good of all people. People over business. Thank you for your time, guys.
Next is, looks like Lohars Braufield. I'm sorry for butchering your name, but I can't read it correctly here. Followed by Bunchy Carter, who did not indicate whether or not he wished to speak.
There we go. Yeah, how you doing? That's Lucas Barfield. Sorry I got bad handwriting. I can't see good. Yeah, my name's Lucas Barfield. I want to talk about the Gary Oaks, but before we get going on the Gary Oaks, I just have to say, as an Alabama native and someone who grew up in the shadow of probably one of the world's most famous critical race theory documents, that would be To Kill a Mockingbird, and to home of Just Mercy and Johnny D and that whole story, that movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it. That's my hometown. I have to tell you, and somebody who literally grew up in the shadow of white supremacy and plantations and all that stuff in Alabama, I have to tell you that little critical race theory exchange earlier where the representative from the school board actually had to apologize for critical race theory, even the rumor of it, I have to tell you that was literally shocking to me as somebody who, I frankly moved to Washington to get away from all this white supremacy nonsense, but Lord have mercy, it is right here in front of me. And I really feel like if we were to teach critical race theory in our schools, actually tell our children what really happened, how white people of European descent went over and kidnapped Africans from Africa and brought them over here and then put them on land that they were busy colonizing and then came out here and colonized land out here in the Northwest, like the previous speaker said, which didn't happen until the late 1800s and really hasn't happened in a lot of ways even till today. If we were actually to teach that critical race theory in schools, and I'm a teacher too, and I have an environmental degree, and I did work for the Forestry Service. I did forget to mention that for a little while there. If we would actually teach that in schools, I think some of these situations would not be happening as much. But what we have here is a bunch of city council people who have gone through life and apparently not really thought about some of these critical race theory ideas, and they're willing to just come in and take over these trees and cut down these trees, which were here way before any of us and way before probably even our grandparents. And we don't even need to talk about climate change and how these trees are literally sequestering carbon in front of us. I went to school in the University of West Florida. I got my degree there, and we talked a lot about beach morphology and how the oak trees down there, the live oaks. And so go down to Florida and talk about to people about cutting down oak trees and what it means down there with the hurricanes coming through. and they just come through and they just ravage the towns because there's no more trees there. I was just talking to my mom today. Over on the east coast of Florida, they've actually seen the light, and apparently all up and down the beach, there at Cocoa Beach and Cape Canaveral, they are planting trees up and down the beach to try to stop the wind, to try to stop that erosion. And then here we are out here in Washington, which you guys claim out here in Washington, you guys are so smart out here. We got Microsoft and Amazon, and everybody's so great in Washington. But in 2021, we're gonna be out here cutting down some oak trees when we all thought this was over in 1965. So let's reverse and don't cut down the Gary oak trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Bunchy Carter, followed by Otto Akitas.
Yeah, Equitas. Hi, my name is Bunchy Carter. I'm the Minister of Defense of the Black Panther Party. I'm a resident of Lakewood, Washington. I'm not a tree hugger either, to be honest with you. If it were not for Siobhan Ayuso, I probably wouldn't be here. However, the longer I sat here, I realized I need to be here because I recognize that the greater populace of this city is not being represented by the decisions that are being made by the people who are supposed to represent them, which is specifically why the Black Panther Party is endorsing Siobhan Ayuso as well as Amelia Escobedo for city council. Because we understand that people who aren't from the same demographic that we're from have a hard time making decisions for those people. I get it. We live in a capitalist society. That's very obvious. It's been obvious from the inception of America. So in a capitalist society, capital is necessary in order for you to thrive. Nobody's dumb, we get that part. The problem is when you endanger the people who are helping to move this thing forward, who are the real engine of this country. It's not the people who are sitting on the boards of CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies who run this country. They're sitting in their office making decisions for people that they're never gonna see face to face. And unfortunately, that's kind of the position y'all see ourselves in right now. I remember we went to Mr. Whalen's house. I don't know if you remember me or not, Mr. Whalen, but we had a conversation with Mr. Whalen when we came to his house during March. It was the last weekend of March. We had a cycle of protests called March Madness. And we spoke to Mr. Whalen concerning many of the same issues that I've heard about today, and in addition to one that I want to bring to the table, which is Saeed Joaquin. You have to forgive me, I get a little choked up about that. The thing about this is this, and I'm only going to say this about Saeed Joaquin. If you can allow the officers who are supposed to be protecting the community to take the lives of the community and not punish them for that, then the thing that's happening with the Gary Oaks doesn't surprise me at all. Because a human life is very valuable. The Gary Oaks are very valuable, but despite the value of human lives and despite the value of the oxygen that we breathe, the decisions that are being made, or decisions rather that are not being made, are the ones that are affecting all of us. I'm not rich. I'm not wealthy. I work a regular job just like everybody else. I got off work right before I came here. But the reality of the matter is, if you really wanted people to feel safe, you can ask anybody in Tacoma, anybody in Lakewood, and now anybody in Seattle. Do you feel safer with the police around or with the Black Panthers around? They wrote an article about it in the newspaper. Everybody said they feel safer with the Black Panthers around because we're gonna make sure nobody dies. 30 seconds, cool. The only thing I can ask at this juncture is, for the safety of your seats, actually, you should probably make the right decision and make sure that you're making decisions for the people who voted you in those seats, not for the people who are trying to pay you to keep them. All power to the people.
Hi, my name is Otto Equitas. I'm the chairman of the White Panther Party of Washington. Like my man said, we live in a capitalist society and government is a capitalist function. We get that. But the world don't answer to capitalism. Planet Earth don't care about capitalism. A lot of people out here have been saying that they ain't tree huggers. I am. I hugged one out in the parking lot. Because, you know, it's shading my car. It's gonna help me breathe tonight. So I consider myself a tree hugger. Everybody's been talking about the warehouses that you guys have built. They ain't being used. When we're talking about debate, we got pros and cons. You got a bunch of people out here that are real angry talking about the cons. Is anybody here pro? Your citizens are talking. You should be listening. The people are tired. The people don't need warehouses. The people don't need parking lots. And whether or not y'all choose to accept it, the people got the power. Arrest the murderer of Saeed Joaquin. Peace.
So all the people who've signed up for public comment, but it doesn't preclude you from commenting if you wish to and haven't signed up. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at public comment? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at public comment? Seeing none, I declare public comment closed. Now move to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk.
A, approval of the corrected minutes of the City Council meeting of June 7th, 2021. B, approval of the minutes of the City Council study session of June 14th, 2021. C, approval of claims vouchers in the amount of $3,029,580.82 for the period of May 15th, 2021 through June 15th, 2021. D, approval of payroll checks in the amount of $2,452,038.31 for the period of May 16th, 2021 through June 15th, 2021. E, motion number 2021-40, reappointing Shalene Potvin Bird and Linda Smith to serve on the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee through November 1st, 2023. F, motion number 2021-41, ratifying the proclamation terminating the civil emergency proclaimed on March 16th, 2020. G, ordinance number 757, repealing certain sections of Chapter 9.06 of the Lakewood Municipal Code relating to controlled substances. H, items filed in the office of the city clerk. 1, Planning Commission meeting minutes of June 2nd, 2021.
Thank you. Is there any matter which any member of the council wishes to have removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move approval of the consent agenda. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Bulkey, seconded by Mr. Whalen, that we adopt the consent agenda. Is there any further comment, questions? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries. We now move to the regular agenda, ordinance number 755. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 755, amending Lakewood Municipal Code, Chapter 1.12, related to city holidays.
For this, we have Ms. Wachter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. I'm Heidi Wachter, your city attorney, and with me is the Human Resources Director, Mary McDougall. In case there are any questions, we covered this at your study session last week. As you know, the state has proclaimed Juneteenth to be a legal holiday, as has the federal government. In order for it to be so recognized at the city of Lakewood, the council would pass the ordinance indicated. I would be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Any questions from Ms. Wachter?
If they're hard questions, I'll defer them to Ms. McDougall, because you know that's how I roll.
Yeah. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Whalen, seconded by Mr. Brandstetter, that we adopt ordinance number 755, recognizing Juneteenth as a city-paid holiday. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We now move to ordinance, thank you, Ms. Walker. We now move to ordinance number 756. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance number 756, adopting the 2021 Comprehensive Plan Amendments.
For this, we have Ms. Spear.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tiffany Spear, Long Range and Strategic Planning Manager. The City Council now has had several study sessions and a public hearing regarding the 2021 Comprehensive Plan Package, and so tonight action is scheduled unless the council were to take different action. There's 8 amendments total, and on the screen you'll see a summary of those. The first one is adopting a new energy and climate change chapter for the Comprehensive Plan. The second is recognizing within the Comprehensive Plan the action taken by Council in 2020 to rezone parcels in Springbrook to Industrial Business Park. The third is recognizing the adoption of the Parks Legacy Plan in 2020. The fourth is recognizing within the Comprehensive Plan the actions that Council has already taken regarding various missing middle types of housing being allowed. And then it also proposes to allow 2- and 3-family dwellings within the R1 through R4 zones, and also multifamily dwellings within MR1 and MR2. 2021-05 relates to the Western State Hospital Master Plan. Number 6 is recognizing adoption of the 2 sub-area plans, downtown and Lakewood Station District. The 8th is rezoning parcels in Tillicum, and then also directing the review of the 2011 Tillicum Neighborhood Plan, the Tillicum Center of Local Importance, and then related comprehensive plan text sections to bring information back to the council in 2022. The 9th is removing the term or phrase community renewal areas from land use policy 18.5. 2021-10 is allowing various water supply and sewer facilities which were inadvertently left out of the code when the council adopted a new 18A in 2019. And the last one is regarding compliance with RCW 35A 21-360 regarding religious organizations hosting the homeless. As I mentioned, there's already been 2 study sessions and a public hearing. Within tonight's package, you'll see an updated version of the Energy and Climate Change chapter, which reflect the amendments that were discussed with Assistant City Manager Dave Buer by Mike Brandstetter, Councilmember Brandstetter, and Councilmember Farmer. And then there's also the draft ordinance 756 for council consideration for action tonight. There's a table, or 3 tables actually, which summarize public comments to the commission and to the city council and then the city's responses. There's a memo that summarizes the changes to the Energy and Climate Change chapter and the amendments themselves. So there's more detail here, which are also included in the cover memo from Mr. Buer regarding the new Energy and Climate Change chapter, just explaining the changes that were made since the council saw it last. The environmental justice and equity policies and tasks are particularly highlighted by the blue arrows in the draft in front of you this evening. And then there's also changes to the goals, policies, and tasks, which are substantive, and here's just a list of some of those summarized for you by Mr. Buer. So within Ordinance 756, as it reads tonight, it does adopt all of the proposed amendments except for 2021-05, and it is directing that one to actually be continued to 2022 because the Western State Hospital Master Plan was not submitted last year as anticipated, but just was recently submitted to the city for review. And it does not direct the Planning Commission to take any further review or action regarding the Energy and Climate Change chapter. So the council discussed that in a couple of study sessions to maybe make some changes regarding how the implementation actions would be handled for the Energy and Climate Change chapter. If the council wishes to do that, then there would need to be an oral amendment this evening to the ordinance. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Ms. Spear? Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Spear, regarding the consider about directing the Planning Commission to review and make, which was essentially their request. But the fact that it's not in this ordinance, that would not preclude us when we begin to look at the next work plan for the Planning Commission to do that without making it a part of this ordinance.
Correct.
As we look forward to doing that.
Correct.
So that doesn't seem to me like a significant omission from the ordinance because it doesn't need the ordinance for that to happen. It just needs council intent voiced appropriately at the right time.
Correct.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? Mr. Whalen.
Couple of questions. With regard to 2021-02, can you describe in a little bit more detail the nature of the impact that will have on the previous zoning decision in 2020? It really doesn't, I know, but for purposes of...
Correct, Mr. Whalen. The 2021-02 is simply to say within the comprehensive plan, there's various and sundry sections that refer to Springbrook as a residential area. And given the action that the council took last year to rezone a number of parcels, those now need to be updated. So in an ideal world, those amendments actually would have been made last year, they just were not. And so we're going back to recognize the action council has already taken. It does not change the action that was taken last year.
With regard to my second question, the climate change chapter, we heard a number of individuals testify today about concerns over the tree canopy and the tree preservation ordinance. My question is there some value in ensuring in the climate change chapter that we review or readdress the tree preservation ordinance in light of the goals and hopeful outcomes in the climate change chapter?
Thank you, Mr. Whalen. I'm going to defer to Mr. Buer, who was the primary drafter.
One of the action plans within the climate change chapter is going back and reviewing the tree preservation code. The code that's in place has been in place since 1996. It went through a review about 5 years thereafter. No substantial changes have been made since. And
since early 2001 or 2.
Yeah. So it is time to go back and take a look at that code and see what the results are. A lot of the cities have made significant changes in tree preservation over the years. And given climate change issues, it seems like it would be an appropriate time. There's also a lot of discussion in the document too about solar use. And there's all kinds of topics that address many of the issues you heard this evening, not only about climate change, but also environmental justice. As I recall, I think that at the request of the City Council, we put in, I believe, 19 different sections dealing with environmental justice embedded within the climate change chapter.
Which
it is a
significant
document, and frankly will affect other planning policies that the city will be reviewing in future years. It goes into hazard mitigations and sustainability and the future of your lakes and things that need to be done to protect your natural resources.
So in terms of process, just describe, if you will, what we would need to do to get the tree preservation work on the docket for consideration through the Planning Commission, I assume first, obviously.
It would be up to the City Council who establishes the work plan. And if the council says that this is a priority, then we would move it forward. But I would also let the council know there are usually 4 topics that bring out large amounts of public comment. 1, adult entertainment. 2, signs. 3, pets and animals. And then 4, tree preservation. So expect a very robust discussion if this is a topic that is chosen for the council to move forward with in future years.
Very good.
Any further questions for Mr. Buer or Ms. Buer? To entertain a motion on ordinance number 756.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Brandstetter, seconded by Mr. Bulkey, that we adopt ordinance number 756, comprehensive plan amendments. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor?
Mr. Brandstetter.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, one comment I definitely did appreciate the fact of how the climate change chapter evolved through this process and the time that was taken to insert the thoughts that came from the comments from multiple folks to be able to go and do that. And recognizing that this is a starting point for us to address this particular topic more directly, okay, and aggressively. So I think that is a significant element of this ordinance. That being said, okay, that I am concerned about comprehensive plan amendment and zoning ordinance amendment 2021-04. And I would move that we delete that item from the ordinance and the comprehensive plan amendments for this year.
And I'll second that.
So, okay, would you restate the section you're referring to? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, it's CPA ZOA 2021-04.
2021 dash.
No, 2021-04.
2021-04.
It relates to the housing.
And we have a page reference for that in our
I have
packet.
109 on that as the actual body of the ordinance, because the ordinance starts on page, well, I have attachment B. I don't know what page are we looking at?
But essentially, this item, the text of this item starts on our packet, page 185.
This is Exhibit B, so on 109.
And it runs through page 193.
So as a quick summary, for those who joined us, this just disappeared from my screen. This would, among other things, update the definition of affordable housing, allow 2 and 3 family detached or attached units in R1, R2, R3, R4 zones, and allow multifamily housing units in MR1 and MR2 zones. It purports to be an update to reflect state law and policy requirements. It also impacts the downtown sub-area plan and Lakewood Station District sub-area plan density increases. So we will address the amendment. It's your amendment, Mr. Branstad. Would you wish to speak to the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This whole section essentially relates to the issues of housing and strategies to deal with all of the concerns around housing, about availability, affordability, but also about the nature and the rules that relate to housing that goes on. That I'm particularly concerned that this particular amendment makes the zoning changes in the R1 through R4 zones and in the mixed residential zones. And my concern has to do with process. That in 2019, this is what is in here was sort of encouraged, not required, by a state statute that went through to do that, along with kind of a laundry list of another sets of actions that can be taken to try to move housing forward. It was my impression that originally this got onto the docket because there was a presumption that in the last legislative session that the legislature would move beyond what it enacted in 2019 and mandate some of these zoning changes regarding single-family residential areas throughout the state. They did not do that. They backed away from that, staying with and with allowing those to be local decisions, while they still encouraged them in that they said they were willing to help folks with certain either grants or other issues that they didn't mandate. So where this refers to reflect state law and requirements, that's somewhere else in the text amendment on a couple of other things, but it doesn't relate to this zoning item that's done. Should note that around the state, I think many cities considered after 2019 items that were on there, and they adopted some to include this. and particularly Walla Walla, Wenatchee, Olympia, are cities that are comparable of size to us somewhat, that went forward and made some changes that this zoning does. But their process was, they didn't do it within and I'll use the term buried inside of a set of comprehensive plan amendment processes that let the process go forward. And in this particular year, where it was both limited by COVID and there were overshadowed by the fact that we are making the initiatives on the climate change to do that. In each of those cities, it was a multi-year, highly visible public engagement process that engaged not the minimum required public hearings, but broad public meetings in groups, and brought together many stakeholders that were not the normal land use stakeholders of developers and things, but they were down into folks in neighborhoods being able to go and do that. The process in Olympia took over 3 years. Walla Walla was a multi-year process, as was Wenatchee, where they ended up with a working group of some 80 stakeholders working to try to go through and try to figure out how do you keep neighborhoods the way that the residents there would like them to be. Well, what can you do to innovatively make changes to them to be able to go and do that and have them remain quality neighborhoods that are there. And then we have next door to us, we have Tacoma. Tacoma is considering essentially this same change along with a number of others, and they are in a months-long process of engaging with the community about all the ideas about how do we make neighborhoods grow and be able to accommodate more people and yet retain the quality of them and being able to go and do that. Their process has been moving through, and it is at a point of where it continues to have public meetings scheduled in neighborhoods around the city. It has 2 on the calendar coming public hearings in front of their council after having gone through a whole series of things with their planning commission. But very specifically, they put out to the public out front that says, we're considering allowing duplexes and triplexes and cottage housing and things in our single-family neighborhoods, and we want to know what you think. And we want to know what do we have to do other than just saying that they can be there that would make it work to keep the nature of the neighborhoods where they are, so that they continue to be the neighborhoods both for the people who live there and that are going on. All those processes differ very, very much from our having run this through this year's comprehensive plan docket. And we're sort of doing this not in a very open, transparent way, but in almost under the radar, okay, in terms of the changes that are there. So I think that housing is a really important issue for us as a council to address, but we shouldn't be addressing it piecemeal and just doing things to do that. We need to start our own process that if it's citywide, but that it's not a sub-area plan process, but it mirrors that in the way that we go out and we say, this is what we're thinking, this is what we want ideas about, this is what we go and do, and we take our time to get it right. I will address the other two items of this why I'm looking to my motion is to delete the entire item. The text amendment section that essentially enumerates all of the things that are sort of in our code now and the things that we have done is there, but there isn't any new policy in it. It's a bit of a historical looking back at what's the current situation document for the most part. It's a bit of a laundry list, and it lacks some assessment of the effectiveness of all the things that are on that list. And just a couple examples on that list, there is the senior housing overlay. Yet, senior housing overlay isn't really been doing anything for us in the past, well, since I've been on the council for the past, in the past 15 years. Then we have an incentive program in our code. It's there and it's going off. It's just never used. We have a cottage housing ordinance that somehow or another it hasn't been there. So having a laundry list and having us act a little bit like Tom Thumb and say, what good boys are we, because we have all these things. Now, it also includes some really good things. It includes the rental housing safety program. It includes a discussion on the multifamily tax exemptions, which are things that have worked for us or are working for us to be able to go and do that. It's interesting to note that in the comments on the multifamily tax exemption, one of the comments is the fact the existence of this program relieves the pressure to try to do development in single-family neighborhoods. But I think that is the kind of a document that we as a council can work on and really sort of say, this is our message about not only our vision for where we're going in terms of doing housing to do that, but that we should start a process that is exclusively about housing and not blended with a lot of other things that were in the comprehensive plan docket this year and in most years. The definition of affordable housing is interesting because we're quoting the state law, but we're saying, but we only want to apply half of it because we think Lakewood is better off only using one definition of incomes as the other. That may well be good in our situation, and it is apparently allowed. But we were on the verge of considering whether to join a county consortium that is going to work along in dealing with the future of housing in a manner that is in collaboration with the other municipalities in Pierce County. And in that last presentation that we had, we said we're not really ready to define that. I asked the question. I was surprised by the answer, but the answer also made sense. That it would be really good if everybody could sort of look at that and see where we're looking to go. And I guess my last thought regarding the changes in zoning that are incorporated with this. We'll get caught in the same concern that many of the folks who were here this evening were talking about, of where we'll have a lot of folks from the public coming, asking us to undo something that we have done. And that isn't always possible, you know, because there are other people that have taken actions in reliance on what we have done to do that. And I'm not convinced that allowing duplexes and triplexes and other things in the zones where we have is actually really consistent with our vision of Lakewood at 30 years is known for its safe and attractive neighborhoods, because I don't know that this is a moving towards attractive neighborhoods, particularly if it's not done with some other rules that will ensure that or make that highly likely to be able to go and do that. So I think housing is an issue whose time has come to be addressed, but not with this comprehensive plan amendment and zoning change. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I won't, I'll echo Councilmember Branstadter's remarks about public process. And I do appreciate that staff put together on relatively short notice impact on various neighborhoods, or more precisely impact on certain parcels. And I think we saw in that there's going to be adverse impacts on some neighborhoods and some neighborhoods because of our zoning, our very light zoning, basically rural zoning of large portions of the city, that there'll be really adverse impacts, and in some cases the adverse impacts will be on poorer neighborhoods. The legislature is moving in this direction because planners believe that this is the future, that we're just going to let developers build anywhere they want, anything they want, as long as it's housing. And what they're not looking at is the unintended consequences. They're not going to go into private developments and do this, because that we saw one whole development that I don't know, went in 50 years ago, and they have covenants that you can't build anything but single-family homes on it. So the legislature at some level is thinking that they're going to make this change, and suddenly they'll create all this housing. And in fact, maybe from that standpoint, but it'll work. But mark my words, they're not going to chop up high-income neighborhoods. They are going to chop up low-income neighborhoods, which is my point here in Lakewood, is we finally have people who are homeowners in these neighborhoods of smaller homes, and they're finally getting home equity because of this latest run-up in prices. And the legislature immediately starts to think of ways of how they can destroy that equity. Now, they don't go into the meeting saying, well, how can we destroy these people's equity? We don't want them to get off the ground. But that's precisely what they're doing. So besides supporting this to get this thing out, I think we should tell our legislative delegation we are opposed to statewide zoning of residential neighborhoods, and we need to make that clear. The defense of single-family home ownership is important to us, especially in lower-income neighborhoods. I would point out we have a cottage housing ordinance. We have PDD, where you can increase the number of allowable units by, I think, half if you do a number of items. We have the downtown and station district plans that anticipate a lot of new multifamily housing going in. So it's not like we haven't tried. It's not like we're sitting here saying, no how, no way, we're not going to do anything. We've met our obligation under the Growth Management Act. Like I say, it all sounds good till the day one of these goes in, and they're calling you up, and just as Councilmember Branstadter just said, hey, how did you let this happen? Unring this bell. And it's going to be like, well, They vested, and we can't unring the bell. So, that would be on us. So I agree, if we have to go forward with this by legislative fiat, then we need to have that robust public process that these other cities have gone about. So with that, I will be supporting the Councilmember Branstadter's motion.
Mr. Whalen.
Just a clarification question for Mr. Buer. Is there a way to look at 2021-04? Because many of these updates are perfunctory a bit. They just recognize kind of what we've done. Can we take out the provisions relating to upzoning residential zones to include the duplex and triplex commentary? Because much of the other stuff is just kind of perfunctory language changes based on what's been done.
That's up to the city council, but you could keep the description of our programs but then take out the specific issues with the R1 zones. But you have to be a little bit more precise on your amendment.
Well, I guess I throw that out to the council, whether or not we throw the baby out with the bathwater with the entirety of 2021-04 here, because I don't see that it pertains solely to the issue of duplexes and triplexes and increased density in such manner in single-family zones.
Yeah, much of the text that you see in that section of the amendment came about as a result of the Lakewood Station District.
Mm-hmm.
And it was our attempt to describe the various programs that we do have in the city of Lakewood that address housing. But it is a bit of a laundry list, but it's sometimes very helpful when we're being challenged over housing policies to have that. But it's really up to the city council. You could make the amendment by just saying, on 18A 4110, delete the requirements or delete the proposal for 2-family attached and 3-family attached, and just leave it as is, which would be to prohibit those uses in those R zones. But that's at the council's discretion.
Right.
Either way is fine. I understand that we're going to end up probably going back and taking a look at this at some future date.
Well, I throw that maybe back, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Branstadter on his motion. I too, like you and Mr. Boki, am concerned about the single-family residential neighborhoods simply because we've done a lot of good work to increase density in the right areas around transit in the Lakewood Station sub-area plan, as well as in the Central Business District, and those combined offer the opportunity for up to 4,000 or more units of new residential housing in the city of Lakewood, which is a lot, given that our population has only increased by about 600 over the last decade, given the census. So I think we have met our workload under the Growth Management Act and the Puget Sound Regional Council edict on population and housing targets. That said, would that accomplish your goal to adopt 2021-04 with the exception of the references to 18A 40.110 with proposals for 2- to 3-family attached housing in residential zones?
It addresses one of my concerns. However, the other concern is that we make a commitment to move forward. And moving forward, I think, is easier if we don't insert all this text in the comprehensive plan, but that we start off with a process of where essentially we're not only looking at the actions that might be taken, but that we're also doing an assessment of the things that we have put in place to see whether they're really the right things that we should have. And if we've inserted them into the comprehensive plan, that becomes more difficult. There is no new policy in this. I mean, we've already adopted the sub-area plans. Each of these things is included in an ordinance and is in the municipal code. But so if at a future time when we are ready to do a piece on housing similar to what we just did on climate, And that might include some zoning actions. It is cleaner if we start with and we can't start with a blank page because there's already a page in the comprehensive plan about housing. But, you know, at least start with where we are now rather than appear to move forward when we really need to be evaluating. That's my thought. So, I guess my answer is yes. I would like to get the 18A zoning table definitely taken out, but I think we can position ourselves best by taking the whole thing out.
So I'm in favor of the amendment. I think that while process is important and transparency is more important than process in many ways, the thing that offends me is 2 and 3 family detached or attached units in R1, R2, R3, because it's kind of an open door for change of character of neighborhoods. I mean, you're talking about somebody being able to put a duplex in their backyard. And to the tree argument, that would change the canopy in Lakewood quite a bit if that started happening in the area that looks forested. So suddenly there will be naked patches, and it's encouraging it. And it's a policy that is, you know, being crammed down or you know, at least the suggestion now, probably more of a cram down by Seattle legislators who recognize a housing shortage and decide they want to zone the entire state. I find that also offensive. I vote against it just because of that. So I'm in favor of Mr. Brandstetter's amendment. If there isn't an amendment to the amendment, I will call for the question on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Amendment carries. We now go to the motion as amended. Is there any further discussion? Well, Mr. Whalen.
Just a follow-up comment on my previous inquiry to Mr. Buer about the climate change chapter. Although we're not going to make an amendment to require or update or change Title 18A.70 right now with regard to the tree preservation ordinance, I highly suggest that we revisit it. I'd like to get council consensus to bring that up in the next year, because I too, when I read the whole climate change chapter, realized we did such great work on it. But it seems incongruous to talk about climate change and yet have an old 1991 or 2001 tree preservation ordinance that exempts industrial zones from the applications of the chapter. So I think we're doing good work by the climate change chapter. I certainly urge support of it, but I would like us to revisit the tree preservation ordinance to be congruent with it.
Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I guess none of us realized that this thing was 20-odd years old and predates, I think, all of us on the council. And then going back to the previous discussion, that if the state imposes this statewide zoning on us, you know, how do our impervious surface regulations stack up? Because I think that would be part and parcel with tree preservation. And how does that stack up in both residential and non-residential areas in comparison? Or how does low impact development impact? Because I'm assuming that these warehouses are being built under modern surface water standards, so they're trying to keep all the water on site, so they're meeting that regulation. But I wouldn't even know what the impervious surface regulation is for my house, for instance. So, and I think that would be part and parcel with that. Where are we in that regulation? Although that goes under a different thing. It doesn't go in the comp plan, does it? You're looking at me.
It doesn't really get into
It goes
the
under the
comp plan.
water. Okay.
Yeah, you get into stormwater management, and I believe, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe most of our single-family and residential properties are exempt from stormwater management, except at the time when they come in for a subdivision.
And then but they do have to meet impervious surface requirements of
Right.
some sort.
And we're beginning to use more pervious asphalt and pervious sidewalks. One of the issues that is sort of discussed in the document dealing with resiliency is using stormwater runoff from roads and streets instead of just infiltrating it into the ground, clean the water up, stick it into a high aquifer so it helps sustain our shallow lakes and intermittent lakes.
Oh, okay.
That's something that you're going to be hearing a little bit more about from Mr. Busich in future meetings. But he and I have had some discussions about changing how we handle hydrology, and that we use the water from stormwater to protect, for example, Carp Lake, Lake Louise, and then potentially Wahop Lake as well, because of their shallow nature and the impacts that climate change will have upon them in the future.
Okay.
There's some significant issues to begin to come out with lakes, and you can contribute that discussion from Mr. Brandstetter when he brought this up at some of our previous meetings. The proposed document actually has a requirement or a suggestion that you move forward with a lakes management plan specific to climate change.
Okay, and that's separate. Okay, so you answered my question. Thank you.
Any other discussion? We'll call for the question on ordinance number 256 as amended. Will all in favor please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We now move to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business to come before the council?
Your third-rate city manager wasn't ready, but there is no unfinished business this evening.
Is there any new business to come before the council?
No new business.
So you are on the depth chart, Mr. Buer.
I know.
Reports by the city manager, sub 2.
Okay. I was asked to provide the city council with an update on our meeting with RPAI. RPAI owns a substantial amount of the property in the town center. And the city has a plan to put a city park in a section of the downtown. And that was approved by the city council several years ago, and a spot was actually designated. So we did have a meeting with RPAI to talk about the fact that we created this downtown plan that the council wants to move forward in a fairly short period of time with a park. We went through the same options that we gave to the city council when this was before you previously. We were very forward. We actually gave them a PowerPoint presentation of exactly what it is that we were going to talk to them about. We met with, I believe, 4 individuals from RPAI, and they had 4 basic comments. 1, homelessness is a problem in the Pacific Northwest, and building a new city park just invites more homeless into the town center. 2, RPAI's primary focus is on leasing commercial space, and by that, they really don't have any plans in my mind or from the conversations that we had about any new redevelopment activity. 3, if a park were constructed, it is likely going to cause amendments to the underlying lease agreements. Lessees will seek economic considerations from RPAI, which in turn adversely impacts RPAI. I would point out that we have had previous discussions about these underlying lease agreements, and they have been fairly much violated throughout the years, so I'm not sure that argument holds water, but they did bring it forward. And lastly, that it's easy to create a park on the front end when you're doing it as a part of a master plan to a project or to a site, but to propose a park in a currently developed retail center is going to be proving to be very challenging, and that yes, the concept can work, but the park must be carefully designed. We were challenged by some members of the RPAI team who did not like the proposal. The meeting kind of ended with the person in charge saying that we need to have further discussions, and he appreciated the candid conversations that both RPAI and the city had. They also mentioned some West Coast issues, such as building codes on the West Coast are much more restringent. And that is true because of earthquakes, but also I know that California and Washington have also proposed energy conservation requirements on new construction. Construction costs are high. It's difficult to find contractor availability, but they also acknowledged that the retail market in the area is, quote unquote, in their words, on fire. And that overall health of the town center is very good. And I guess that kind of underscored some of their reasoning that there may be no need to make any changes. There was a topic on numerous things. We talked about wanting a partnership. We talked about what a successful city park would look like. We were very clear about talking to them about the city council's timeline, 2 to 4 years. And that just didn't seem to be in their timeline whatsoever. We did talk about property contamination very briefly. We also informed them that not only is the city proposing to make an investment of between $10 to $15 million for a new park, which we see as an economic development tool, but the city is also interested in using EDA grants to begin the process of putting in green streets into the town center, which was a part of the downtown plan. So that again is a multi-million-dollar investment the city is proposing at no cost to RPAI at this point. And here we are, probably perhaps as high as $20 million wanting to make improvements to the town center. And we're not getting a really good feel or vibe from RPAI at this point. So we agreed that we would need some additional meetings. I think they're going to go talk to their management a little bit more. And we agreed to meet next 3 to 4 weeks once people got back from vacation. So that's kind of a brief status report. You did get an update in the City Council Manager's report on this subject. But if you have any questions, I'll...
Questions for Mr. Buer? Mr. Whalen.
Where are we, and or what would it take to do a bit more schematic design about a potential park location that might be a win-win? And I mean the Gottschalk's pad primarily, where it wouldn't require moving or destroying or altering any existing buildings, but would in fact just enhance what is existing and unutilized.
The city manager directed myself and Todd Kraus to come forward this fall in September with a proposal for a park design. So, you know, that's on the horizon, but if there's nothing from RPAI in return, I'm not sure if that's a good use of the funds at this point. I think we need to have this next discussion to see where they're at.
Well, and then that leads me to my next question. Given that this is a fairly significant council priority, I would hope that the next round of discussions includes the various tools that a city has to ensure that property that has a public purpose can be obtained through the process allowed by state law.
Well, Mr. Whalen, I brought that to their attention. Some of the members bristled at the fact that I even talked about it, but I was very candid in saying that is an option that the city council always possesses. I think they were a bit surprised.
At what point would you feel you would need further direction from the council to have that tool available for your discussion purposes? Not fully available, but you know, more robust discussion by the council with regard to that.
I think if you're talking about, you know, potential legal action, having a discussion in executive session would be the most appropriate place. Did I handle that well, Heidi?
Yeah. It's not on your agenda, but it's on mine.
Yeah, I suggest that we,
No, you don't have
Consider
to
it.
suggest. It's going to happen. Anything further, Mr. Buer?
Yes, I was required to read the following, so please excuse me.
is it a poem or what?
Did you skip
No,
class?
this is not my style, but I'm being required to read the following. There's city council picture. Updated city council group photo is needed. And would the council like this to occur at 6:30 p.m. on July the 12th? Before the city council study session, or 6:30 p.m. prior to the July 19th meeting?
Council members, you're welcome to just let Ms. Schumacher know your preferred date. She's very good at getting everyone in the right place on the right date.
Why don't we have the city clerk send out an inquiry to council members, because we have a couple of absent ones, and see if we can gain perfect attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. National Night Out, just a reminder to the City Council that it is August the 3rd. There are currently 10 events being scheduled. They begin at 5 p.m. All council members have RSVP'd to ride along with the police officer. There's also a recommendation that kicking off National Night Out with a dedication of new improvements at Harry Todd Park. One option is to do this at 5 p.m. and a second option is to schedule for earlier in the afternoon at 4. For planning purposes, we'd like to hear from council which option works best for your schedule. And so I would suggest that you may wish to contact the city clerk.
Okay.
I guess that I would say that both options work. Backing up, if it's at Harry Todd Park at either 4 or 5, but we somehow have to have a liaison with the police officer that we're going to be accompanying for that evening, then, and are we meeting them at the police station? So is that then a half an hour earlier than that? So I'm trying to see what the timeline is. I guess if I had to choose between the two, I'd choose 5, because I would hope that at 5 we'd get more community folks there.
Okay.
But at 4 we'd get more kids.
I don't know that I actually did RSVP. So I was just planning to go to ones in my neighborhood. I think the Harry Todd one should be on a different, because I think if we get out there to Tillicum at 5, we're not out of there till 6. And the other events are, some of them are going to go on a little while. I don't know. I'll leave it up to the wisdom of the body.
You know, I think the people to consult on this are really the first responders, both from police and fire, who know which ones open when, and seem, in my experience, seem to be able to guess which ones are going to have people at what time. I'd be literally taking a shot in the dark if I tried to pick one.
I have no preference, just wherever I need to be, that will be fine, just tell me.
Moving on, just a report that there are signal box wraps being installed. There are 6 locations: a Tribal Quilt, Colorful Rocks, Leap of Faith, Still Across, and Mount Rainier. So those are being placed right now. I did already mention this economic development grant. We're talking about using that for some complete streets projects. That's a part of an ARPA funding process of about $3 billion. More information to follow. And we have received a request for proclamation commemorating the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. And unless there are no objections, this will be scheduled for your July 19th regular meeting. And then upcoming events, July 7th, we have a farewell reception in honor of Colonel Sky Duncan and Colonel Patrick O'Sullivan, the McCord Club. On July 14th, a change of command at Joint Base Lewis McCord. On July 20th, another change of command ceremony on the McCord Field area. Again, August 3rd is National Night Out. And on September 18th, the 25th anniversary of city incorporation would occur at the Colonial Plaza. And at that same time, we will attempt to have a night market, which would start at 2 p.m. and go to 8:30 p.m.
Which date is that?
September 18th.
Great.
And with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my remarks.
Questions for Mr. Buer? Then we'll move to the city council comments. Mr. Branstetter.
I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Bell.
I am good, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bulkey.
Couple questions, or one question. We got the senior scoop here, and I didn't read it too closely. When is this, are we planning to open the senior center anytime soon, or we've effectively lost it, right, to the county? Or do we have plans, because they might be using it for a while?
Councilmember Boki and members of the council, yes, you're reminding me that I think the county took it for purposes of jury trials, so we will find out exactly what the plan going forward is. I did see Elizabeth Scheid in the city hall today, so I'm sure there's something going on.
Okay, yeah, because the civil trials are out there, right, and the county is, yeah, renting it to the court. Okay. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you. Just a couple of updates. As a member of the Pierce Transit Commission, we've spent lots of hours interviewing candidates for the new CEO position. We should be announcing the board selection in the next probably week to 2 weeks. We have a big meeting this week to finalize our review and consideration. But two good candidates, more to follow on that. The public art process through the Arts Commission has concluded. They will be presenting a recommendation at the study session, I believe, next week on the 12th. The process has been lengthy and thorough. It started with a request for proposal for a bunch of artists. We had 16 that were culled down to 6. They were interviewed and selected down to 3. Those 3 submitted 2 designs each. Those designs were subjected to an interview by the subcommittee. The subcommittee then made a recommendation to the full Arts Commission today on a design to present to council. So when it comes next week, happy to answer any questions, but just know that there's been a lot of process on that, and more to follow, more public input, which will be good on the selected piece. So it's a good thing. Let's see what else we got going on this week. I think that is the major update from my end. I would love to hear from our chief of police and West Pierce what the reaction was by way of calls for service during the 4th of July timeframe. As you know, there's always a renewed clamor for fireworks restrictions. I'd love to know how it went.
And our acting city manager, Todd Kraus, was telling us this morning that we would be giving you a presentation on exactly that.
That works. Thank you very much.
And I'll pass on council comments, but meeting isn't over. We will recess into executive session for approximately 30 minutes pursuant to RCW 4231.10(1)I to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation, and pursuant to RCW 4231.10(1)B to consider the acquisition of a parcel of a site or parcel of property with the public knowledge regarding which would potentially impact price. And the city council is not expected to take any action following the executive session other than to adjourn. We're in recess for executive session.
Oh, is that right? But in Tacoma where they're banned.